Welcome in, listeners. This is Margin Mavens, a podcast hosted by Steph and Kayla, where we share our thoughts on all things literature. Today's episode is about the Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas, whom you guys may know from when we covered Cemetery Boys last season. In this story, the Mexican gods of lore are very much real and divided into tiers, from golds to jades to obsidians. Theo, our protagonist, is put into a tournament to determine who will be the next Sunbearer, and things get complicated. Now make sure to grab a snack and a drink unless you're driving, then remember 10 and 2 and come hang out with us while we dive in. So let's talk about this. Lil Theo is a son of Quetzal, right?
Mhm.
So she is goddess of birds. Right off the bat, we get a very interesting kind of introduction into his world and how the city of Quetzal works and how he is revered, and his mom is definitely revered, but they are living amongst the humans. There's no distinctions between them. You know, they don't view him as like a circus monkey, and he doesn't view
Right.
them as like outsiders. They are his people.
Right.
That is incredibly important to kind of what's going on. So we find out the lore behind everything, right? And so we find out that Soul was essentially murked. Soul was murked. And so their body essentially became a bunch of different stones, and those stones got scattered throughout Mexico. Each temple, right? These stones are what keeps the obsidians at bay, because the obsidians become the bad guys because they wanted more power and they wanted humans to work for them, and all of the things that evil gods tend to want to do. The golds become the fancy schmancy people who
Mhm.
seem to have more attention. They become the heroes of the story. They are the ones more often becoming sun bearers. And then you have the jades, who are
Mhm.
kind of the smaller goddesses and gods. And it is their children, which in this, obviously, because it's Mexican story, is semidios. So
Mhm.
demigods, but in Spanish, which
Mhm.
just I thought was a cool touch.
I think it's very cool because a lot of times when you get any sort of Spanish in a book, it's in italics.
Yeah.
It's not.
And this is just how it be.
Yeah. They speak Spanish.
They
Like,
speak
deal with
Spanish.
it.
Yeah. It's super fun to me. I think Aiden Thomas does a phenomenal job every single time of giving me, like, his books feel like a warm cup of like Abuelita chocolate.
I was just gonna say Abuelita chocolate. Yeah.
Like they really speak to my Mexican self, and I appreciate it immensely, especially this one. Like, I already felt it with Cemetery Boys, but Cemetery Boys was a lot more Latine,
Mhm.
whereas this one is very
This one is
Mexico,
specifically more
And
Mexican.
so really appreciated that and everything that had to do with that. We find out that there is a tournament that goes on every decade, and a new sun bearer is chosen, and that sun bearer is meant to, I mean, Mexicans have a history of human sacrifice seen in most, if not all, of the indigenous cultures of Mexico. I'm not backing it, but it made sense for their culture. So we find out that the sun bearer, after winning, the winner would sacrifice the
The
least
the
ranked,
epic loser.
the
Yeah, the
epic
least rank.
loser. And so that's kind of something that's like hanging over all of their heads. And so in those aspects, it was very similar to like a Hunger Games-esque kind of theme, because you had these people kind of creating a show and entertainment around this tournament where inevitably people get really hurt. Sometimes they die. The person that's in last place, that one undeniably is going to die, right? But it's something that they kind of leave on that back burner because they focus on the fame and the glory and the fact that you are doing a great service for all of the people, and you're keeping the obsidians at bay. A couple things that are important for Theo: he wears a binder, right? But he is not wearing a binder for what would be kind of considered normal for trans or non-binary individuals, right? Theo is using a binder because he doesn't want his wings to come out, because his wings have not gotten with the program and they are still femme presenting, and he hates them. And so he constantly is wearing a binder. And then we start meeting more of the gods, more of the people. And we end up meeting this little kid named Zale. And he is the son of Mala Suerte, which is bad luck in Spanish. And he gets pulled into this tournament. And immediately everybody is like, okay, well, that's odd because jades don't tend to get pulled into these tournaments. It tends to just be golds getting pulled in. And right after Zale gets pulled in, Theo gets pulled in. So now it's 2 jades going in,
Mhm.
right? And so the
It's just,
golds
like, unheard
apart
of.
from so the golds apart from their friend.
Nia? Nia?
Yeah, yeah.
For
Other
me,
than
it'd be
her,
Nia, but yeah.
I don't know. She is obviously like, "Oh, this is so great. We're going to have so much fun together." You see that we have basically from the jump this weird tension between Theo and Aurelio because Theo obviously has a huge crush on Aurelio, but he's pissed that he has a huge crush on Aurelio.
He's
And
also pissed at Aurelio.
yeah, so
Like,
there's a lot of things. They were homies and then Aurelio kind of just dropped him all of a sudden, and so we don't find out kind of what was going on with that for a while. In case this isn't obvious for those, we did not say it at the beginning, but anybody who's familiar with us should know this conversation will have spoilers, so just bear that in mind before continuing to
yeah,
listen.
we're not I mean, it's hard to talk about this book without spoilers.
Or any book.
So,
I'm really bad at talking about
yeah,
books without spoilers, but I do my
yeah.
best to keep it
At least
vague.
give you a little something something.
And so anyways, as this tournament kind of progresses, right? Things are not adding up. The math is not mathing, right? People are acting a lot more aggressive than they normally do. They are actively trying to sabotage others in a way that's not just, hey, this is a tournament kind of thing.
Not just sabotage, but they're actively, in some cases, trying to kill
Yeah.
the other contestants.
Theo seems to kind of be the only one that's like, hey, well, him and Aurelio really are the only ones that are like, hey, this is odd. That something odd is happening. And they're, as the story progresses, Theo moves up in rank because he's kind of coming into his own. His wings start presenting male. And so he's able to just kind of exist in a lot more confident way. Zale is also trans, but he's younger than Theo. I think he's like 12. Uh
13?
he's a young child, and
He's a child,
yeah, and Theo kind of brings him under his wing,
literally and
literally,
figuratively.
yeah, and they become best buddies, right? And so Theo's whole goal is to keep Zale from being that bottom rank so that he doesn't not have to be sacrificed at the end. Okay. Now, without really diving into like plot or anything, I really loved going to the different cities.
Yeah.
I really loved kind of seeing the relationship that Theo has with his mom, and that
Mhm.
she is like constantly trying to be strong for him, but this is like really scaring her and really freaking her out.
Mhm.
Once he starts doing better, when we get to these jade cities, he's actually being cheered on, and the golds are kind of confused because it's never happened to where, the audiences aren't made up of gold colors.
Right.
And the side characters were so interesting, like even the ones that were not the nicest were incredibly interesting because you saw that they were like multifaceted, and
Mhm.
the foreshadowing was there, that it was more than just this tournament thing, that something else was manipulating kind of the energy around everything,
Right.
because you would see these guys in their own turf or their own friend groups, and you would see a completely different side of them.
It's an interesting scenario that these ultimately they're all children, I think, on some level. Like they're all I think Zio is the youngest at 13,
Yeah.
but they're all teenagers.
Yeah, so they're all incredibly young. As the story progresses, right, we
Mhm.
see more and more of Aurelio, and we see that he is different than the rest of the gold. He's a lot more stoic, he's a lot more reserved. He doesn't do any of the bullying that the rest of them kind of lean into. He is constantly trying to kind of like calm his sister down because she seems to be the one that's a lot more like prideful and a lot more like haughty.
She's also got a really nasty temper.
Yeah, which makes sense. They control fire. I get it.
Same. Valid.
Some of my favorite scenes have to do with Aurelio and Theo in the fact that like Theo has a moment where he's really upset that Aurelio never touches his wings. And it's not even because he likes people touching his wings, but because Aurelio seems almost like he tries to get farther away from them. And Aurelio
Yeah.
has that moment where he's like, I don't touch them because you haven't like given me permission to. And it was
And
such
it's
a
like,
sweet
yeah.
moment because he's not treating him like a novelty. He's just treating him like somebody that he has a semblance of like respect for. And obviously we find out why he really like cut off Teo later on and kind of what he's been going through being son of forgot her name because don't like her.
But it also really speaks a lot to like the expected machismo
Mm-hmm.
in Latinx families
Yep.
and like the expectation that the son is going to be, you know,
Strong and capable and
the
stoic and never share
protector, the
feelings and
provider. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And it was a really nice way to see that sort of like upended a little
Yeah.
bit
And
with
him trying to like
Aurelio.
come to terms with it as well.
Mhm.
Because he's kind of like aware of what's being expected of him, but in his own way is still trying to like combat that. So that was really nice.
Mhm.
As the story continues, there is a betrayer amongst them.
Yes.
Teos tries to warn them, right? He really has a moment of like, and it's just stuck in my head because of the dark mirror, but he really has like a Cassandra moment and like, hey
Yeah.
guys, everything is
Something's wrong.
wrong here, right?
Mhm.
Like none of us are talking about it, but everything is bad. Something is going
Mhm.
on. Something else is manipulating the situation, right? And the entire time, Zao is kind of like becoming more and more separate from the rest of them. He's kind of drawing into himself, and
Mhm.
Teo kind of takes it in as, oh, he's freaking out because he's close to being last ranked. He is last ranked, all of these things kind of
Mhm.
culminating. And then because Teo is honestly just incredibly capable and a cool character and like really badass, he comes to the point where he wins the Sunbearer Trials. By this point, he and Aurelio have gone a lot closer, right? You can see
Mhm.
the romance is romancing. There's a lot of budding little love
Moment.
happening here. It's very
Tension.
cute. Aurelio's sister ends up in last place. And you know what? That would put a damper on anyone.
Mhm.
I get it.
Especially because 'cause they're twins. They're
Yeah.
very close.
She's the only one that he really has on like a deep level because she understands kind of what he's going through because his whole thing is that he can control fire, he can do all these things, right? But he is not immune to fire like others semidios from this parent should be. And so
Yes.
it's kind of a point of shame for him. And so she's aware of all of this. And so she's pushing him very urgently to become the sun bearer. And in doing
Mhm.
so, kind of gets manipulated by outside forces that we'll get into in a second. But she
Mhm.
ends up being that last ranked, right? And so, like we said, it puts a damper on things. The
Right.
budding romance gets put to a very stark halt because Aurelio is like, you're gonna have to sacrifice my sister. And like
Yeah.
I would rather it be me to die.
Right.
And Tails like, I don't want to do that. Like,
Dale
all
doesn't
of
wanna do it at all. He
yeah,
doesn't agree with the whole
yeah, he's
sacrifice
like, this
process
whole
or
thing
anything.
is bad. He's like, I don't
Yeah.
even want to be Sunbearer anymore. I think the whole
Yeah.
system is broken. And so it comes to the moment and he decides not to. He decides
Mhm.
he's not doing it. He will not be a part of this. And then things go very bad very quickly, right? So we find out
Real
the
quickly.
yeah, super quick. So we find out an overarching plot, right? He wasn't crazy. People were messing with the thing. We end up having
The
a
obsidians.
coup essentially where
Yeah.
the obsidians come in once the soul stone is not properly fortified or whatever brujeria they do. The obsidians start coming down, right? Listen, I know they're the bad guys. I get it. But Chupacabra showing up
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
had me
Really, like
shivering in my timbers. And seeing these bad guys show up was really cool. And then seeing all of the gods immediately going into like DEFCON 9, or whatever
Right.
the scary one is, of being like, okay, we have to do this, 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 right? You have Dios
Mhm.
Guerra, who is, think of him as Ares. He is immediately coming in and coming up with formations and what that has to happen. And
Bag
then
plan. Yep.
I think it's Lumbra is the twins' mom. She also is
Mhm.
trying to take, you know, kind of control of what's going on with the gods. And what I really enjoy is that a certain group of the gods kind of go off into their own faction because the plan has become
Fend the
fend
city.
off. Yeah. Protect the cities, fend off the obsidians. Nothing else we can do. Soul is gone. Then there's a small faction that's like, actually, we can probably save Soul. But some of us need to go off on this adventure into the Badlands, which are called
Los Retos?
Los Restos.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the rest. Which I think is a really fitting name for these Badlands because you have the golds, the jades, and the rest. Like they kind of just get pushed off. And we
Mhm.
find out that little Zale is a traitor.
Yeah.
And I mean, okay, full transparency because we're always honest to our listeners. I knew that Zale was going to be the bad guy, not just from like the foreshadowing that Aiden like puts into this and like the A+ writing, but because by this point the second book had already come out, and because I pre-ordered it, I got really fancy little cards with it, like little like they look like Pokemon cards. And one of them has Zeo on it, and it says like who he's the
The
child
sun.
of. Yeah. I don't know if Kayla knows that, and I'm not gonna spoil that yet because we're not in that yet. Anyways, we find out that he has betrayed everyone, and Hale kind of finds this out in like the worst way possible because as the world is literally falling apart and their friends are being sucked into this like black hole thing, he goes to save Zale, and Zale like punches him and is like, "I'm an
Yeah.
obsidian. I did this," and goes off. It does his whatever. The reason I'm rushing through this plot so quick is because there's a point that has been on my brain for weeks. Oristella, yeah, has this moment of coming to terms with the fact that she has been manipulated. She knows that she's about to go into this black hole thing,
Mhm.
into Los Restos. She knows her brother is going to freak out, right? And she looks at Teo and says, "Find us," right before she goes. If
Mhm.
that is not Percy to Nico in Mark of Athena coded,
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
know what else is. Because that hurt so bad because you knew in that moment, right, that these characters were fully aware, or well, she at least was fully aware that wherever she was about to go was gonna suck.
Yeah.
Right? Like she knew I am basically going to the hell of my religion, my mythology, right? I'm going to trust that this person that I've been actively egging on and
Mhm.
being kind of the worst to this entire book, right? I'm going to have this one moment of clarity and I'm going to bank that if anyone will find us, it shall be him, right? And so the rest of the story kind of gets set there where this is happening at the end, right? We find out that Nia, Aurelio, and Teo are all going to go into Los Restos in order to save the world, essentially, in book 2. Gee, so this next book that we will be reading very shortly is that
Mhm.
finale,
I got
right?
questions.
I've got questions, I've got comments, I've got concerns. Yeah, I loved this book, devoured it, gobbled it up one sitting.
Had me
It
laughing.
it fed
Just so
me in a way that only Hispanic books by Hispanic authors can.
amen. Amen. Preach.
Incredibly important to, I think, just like get back to your roots every once in a while,
Yeah.
having family that can like trace our lineage back to those human sacrificing Aztecs. Really cool, but also I was like, yeah, no, this would suck.
Yeah.
I would 100% be like, I don't want to do this.
Correct.
Hello. Do I need to
Correct.
talk to HR? Like, loved it. I loved the fact that everything simply was. There wasn't like a need for explanation as to like how trans people could exist, right? It wasn't a question. It
Mhm.
was They do
Nope.
this, and then they do the ceremony, and then
There you
life is good, and people understand, right? And there's not anybody trying to change any bills or laws in this universe. That was pretty cool to see that those in charge just were okay with understanding the fundamentals of these human beings having rights. So, with that being said, there's ever a doubt as to where we stand as a platform and as people, this should clear that up pretty quick.
There shouldn't be a doubt.
There shouldn't be a doubt. I think we make it really obvious where we stand.
Yeah, if you're transphobic, hit the frickin' road. Get
Yeah,
out of here.
with your face.
Yeah.
But anyways, on that aggressive little note, we're filming this. It's February 3rd. You know, January has just happened.
Mhm.
We're filled with rage. Anyways, thank you guys for listening and
We
hanging
love
out with
you.
us today. If you have not already, consider following us on Instagram at Margin Mavens, where you get a bunch of cool news and a bunch of cute graphics. For those
Mhm.
interested in the unedited versions of these episodes, you can get those by subscribing to our Patreon, where the links are below. And as always, remember you are loved and that we appreciate you.